The morning sun had barely begun to stretch across the dusty plains when the rangers noticed a small figure at the edge of the dry riverbed. At first, it seemed almost like a shadow, too still to be real, yet impossibly present against the pale ochre soil. As they moved closer, the outline of a young elephant emerged. Lying with his legs folded awkwardly beneath him, his trunk curled half around a clump of parched grass. There was an unsettling stillness about him, a quiet that seemed too deep for a wild calf. Each subtle rise and fall of his tiny chest was measured, slow, almost cautious, as though the world around him had grown too large, too dangerous. The rangers exchanged a glance, unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. Something was wrong. Dust clung to the calf's dark skin, outlining every contour of his fragile frame. Tiny scars and abrasions traced faint lines along his flanks, the remnants of minor skirmishes or careless brushes with the unforgiving landscape. The air shimmered with heat, the sun pressing down relentlessly on the cracked riverbed. Despite the warmth, the calf shivered intermittently, his small ears flicking against imagined threats. Each movement was hesitant, deliberate, as though he had learned early the weight of vulnerability. A single leaf fluttered across his back, and he lifted his trunk just slightly, testing it with the faintest of sniffs before letting it rest again. The rangers approached slowly, voices hushed and deliberate, their boots soft against the parched soil. The calf did not flee, though his eyes round, dark, and glistening, tracked every step. He tilted his head slightly, ears pressed close against the sides of his skull, listening and learning. One of the rangers crouched just beyond the immediate perimeter, careful to remain non-threatening. "It's okay, girl," he whispered, voice low, more a vibration in the dust than a command. The words seemed almost to dissolve into the dry air. But the calf's small frame shifted minutely toward them. A flicker of cautious recognition. The landscape around them was stark and unyielding. The riverbed, once a thriving artery of water and life, now stretched dry and cracked, the banks lined with brittle reeds and sparse shrubs. Bones of fallen trees jutted from the earth like ancient splintered sentinels. Insects buzzed in steady, imperceptible rhythms, while the occasional call of a distant bird punctuated the quiet. Even in this desolation, life persisted. A small lizard skittered across the surface, and the wind whispered through the reeds, carrying the faint scent of distant water and dry earth. Yet the presence of the calf, so small and alone in this vast expanse, added a weight that pressed against the senses, a quiet urgency that demanded attention. He lifted his trunk again, this time letting it drop in a slow, deliberate motion, brushing against the dust as if testing its texture, grounding himself in the space around him. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated, reflecting the light and the enormity of his surroundings. Each subtle shiver of his frame conveyed not panic, but profound uncertainty. The rangers noted the way his legs trembled as he attempted to push himself higher, uneven movement revealing the strain in his muscles. He was tired, wary, and aware of something unseen, some distant threat that seemed to linger in the air just beyond human perception. The calm of the morning was punctuated by the occasional soft rumble that escaped the calf's throat. It was a low, hesitant sound, neither fully a cry nor entirely a call for help, but a mixture of both. He stretched his small trunk out toward a bush, grazing at the brittle leaves for sustenance, and in that motion, the ranger saw a resilience that belied his fragile appearance. Even in his weakness, he was still trying, still navigating the harsh world with tentative steps. One ranger knelt carefully at the edge of the riverbed, watching the calf's movements and noting every small sign. His hand hovered over a first aid kit, not as a reflexive reaction, but as a silent readiness, an acknowledgement that intervention might be needed. The calf flinched at a sudden breeze, ears flicking, and let out another soft rumble. The ranger whispered again, "You're almost there," his voice gentle, carrying no threat, only steady encouragement. Slowly, the calf shifted his weight, pushing his body up slightly, struggling against the dust and the pull of gravity. A tiny battle in the quiet morning. The dust around the calf's body shifted with each motion. rising in delicate clouds that caught the light like miniature sunbursts. The texture of the soil was rough against his skin, tiny pebbles pressing into tender pads on his feet. His trunk brushed against the earth, feeling the cracks and grooves, seeking balance and reassurance. The rangers observed, noting how he tested each movement, each shift in weight before committing. There was intelligence in his caution, a small, instinctive wisdom that seemed beyond his size. The moment stretched, elongated by the heat and silence. The rangers felt the weight of it, the tension that existed in the stillness. Each careful breath of the calf, each hesitant twitch of his ears or flick of his tail, was a narrative of endurance and survival. They had seen many animals in distress before, but there was something uniquely fragile about this young elephant, a raw, unpolished courage that demanded respect rather than pity. After what felt like hours, but was only minutes, the calf finally managed to lift his body higher, legs bending beneath him as he pushed against the earth. His trunk extended, curling briefly around a tuft of grass as if to steady himself, and then fell again. The rangers remained patient, offering quiet murmurs of reassurance, but allowing him to dictate the pace. There was no rush, no insistence, only the shared rhythm of cautious trust. The morning wore on, the heat rising and the shadows shifting across the dry riverbed. In this fragile suspended time, the calf lay partially upright, every motion a testament to endurance, every soft rumble a signal of persistence. The rangers watched, aware that they were witnesses to something delicate and profound. There was no sudden drama, no climactic revelation, only the quiet, patient emergence of life. The first fragile steps of a young soul finding footing in a harsh, indifferent world. The calf's dark eyes, round and glistening, lifted briefly toward the rangers, reflecting not fear but awareness, a tentative acknowledgement of help without demand. The wind shifted, dust swirling softly around him, brushing against his legs and back. He lifted his trunk once more, testing, sensing, grounding himself in the moment. The rangers exchanged quiet looks, understanding that this small, still shadow had survived the night, had endured alone, and had the first spark of strength to face what came next. The calf's small body pressed against the sun-baked earth, each movement a careful negotiation with gravity. But as he shifted, the rangers noticed something that made them pause. Around him, the dry soil was etched with footprints, many too large, others too unfamiliar, forming a rough circle that encompassed him like an invisible fence. Some prints were fresh, the edges still crisp, while others had begun to crumble under the heat of the rising sun. There was a subtle tension in their arrangement, as if the earth itself were trying to tell a story of encroachment and silent observation. The calf froze for a moment, ears twitching, eyes scanning the edges of the riverbed where the shadows stretched long and uncertain. The footprints were not from his herd, nor from animals the rangers could immediately identify. They suggested the presence of something nearby, a predator or scavenger, but there was no immediate threat visible. The calf's legs trembled as he attempted to rise higher, pushing against the dust and uneven ground. His trunk swayed slightly, brushing against the soil as though seeking reassurance in its texture. The circular pattern of prints suggested movement in and out, a repeated checking of the perimeter. The calf responded instinctively, nose low to the ground, sniffing, then stepping, tentatively, toward the edge of the circle, then pulling back. He was not panicked. His actions were deliberate, searching, subtle blend of fear and hope. The rangers crouched nearby, careful not to close the circle too quickly, allowing him space to examine the scene on his own terms. One whispered softly, "Stay calm, girl," their voice low enough that it merged with the faint hum of the wind across the cracked earth. The calf's ears flicked in response, but he did not flee. He stretched one foreleg forward, pressing it into the dusty surface, feeling the uneven impressions left behind by whatever had moved through here. His small tusks scraped faintly against the soil as he nudged at one of the prints, curiosity tempered by caution. There was a subtle intelligence in his movements, a way of reading the world through texture, scent. In subtle vibration, the ranger's eyes followed the tracks closely. Noting how the prints varied in depth and spacing, some suggested a creature larger and heavier than the calf, moving with purpose, while others were smaller, irregular, almost hesitant. The circle around him seemed to close and expand in alternating patterns, as though whatever had passed here had been watching, testing, waiting. The calf sniffed along the edge of a fresh print, his trunk quivering slightly, and then lifted his head, eyes wide and scanning the horizon. The wind shifted, carrying a faint scent of earth and dry grass, and the calf stiffened, nostrils flaring. Something, somewhere, had come too close for comfort. And yet, he did not retreat entirely. The rangers remained silent, careful not to impose themselves. The calf's small frame shook with effort as he attempted to rise fully, pushing against the dust and his own trembling legs. His trunk swung in a slow arc, grazing a stone-strewn patch, and he pressed one hind leg forward to find better footing. The circle of tracks seemed to close in response, a subtle reminder of the presence that lingered unseen. Yet there was another force at work. The calf was not simply reacting to fear. His movements revealed a searching intent, a determination to locate someone absent. The rangers realized that he was looking for a familiar presence, a member of his herd who had not returned. A breeze stirred, carrying the dry scent of earth and distant vegetation, and the calf's small eyes brightened with recognition of familiar traces. Tiny twigs snapped under his tentative steps as he circled one patch of disturbed soil repeatedly, trunk extended and swaying in quiet examination. The rangers noted how he paused near each print, touching the edges lightly with the tip of his trunk, pressing against the ground almost ritualistically. There was no panic in his behavior, only a careful, deliberate attempt to understand the meaning of what had transpired during the night. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows that stretched across the cracked riverbed. Heat began to seep into the soil, and the calf's skin glistened with a fine layer of dust mixed with sweat. Despite the strain of standing, he did not lie down again. His small body moved in short, deliberate bursts, legs trembling but determined. The footprints around him seemed to pulse in memory, a record of danger and absence, guiding him in his silent search. His trunk extended, brushing against the prints repeatedly, nostrils flaring with quiet intensity. He sniffed the air, ears pivoting in subtle rhythms, scanning for scent sound. Any clue that might lead him to the one he sought. One of the rangers crept slightly closer, careful to remain on the periphery. "You're doing fine," they murmured, voice soft, carrying no pressure. The calf's eyes flicked toward them briefly, then returned to the prints, a flicker of acknowledgement passing between observer and observed. He had allowed the humans near enough to feel safe, yet he retained the autonomy to continue his careful investigation. Each shift of weight, each tremble in his legs, was an assertion of courage. Each sniff and step forward a declaration of intent. The tracks revealed patterns of movement pauses, retreats, and small deviations that told of a night of unease. The calf traced them slowly, tentatively, his small trunk testing each indentation. While the rangers watched in quiet awe, he paused near a cluster of prints, lifting his head to catch a scent that had been carried across the earth, ears twitching in slow, deliberate motions. A soft rumble escaped his throat, low and tentative, and he pressed his trunk against the soil again. The rangers recognized it as a sound of recognition, of hope tempered by worry. Minutes stretched, measured in dust motes, drifting in the warm morning light. The calf made small steps around the circle of prints, each movement a careful balance of courage and caution. His body trembled, legs straining under the effort, yet he did not stop. There was a quiet determination in the way he tested each movement, a patient persistence that suggested an understanding of his responsibility to the one he sought. The rangers remained at a respectful distance, noting every subtle gesture, the way his ears flicked, trunk swayed, and tail twitched in moments of tension and realization. Finally, the calf paused in the center of the circle, trunk lowered, nostrils quivering as he traced the surrounding prints one last time. The sun had climbed fully, warming the parched earth, casting the circle of tracks into stark relief. The rangers observed that his trembling movements were no longer just the result of fear. They were evidence of bravery, deliberate decision to confront uncertainty in order to find someone missing. The calf's gaze lifted toward the horizon, ears slightly spread, and he let out a soft, tentative rumble. "We'll help you," one ranger whispered gently, barely audible above the dry wind. The words hung in the air, but the calf's attention remained fixed on the empty space where his herd members should have been. The calf stood at the center of the scattered footprints, small and tense against the sun-warmed earth. Each tremor in his legs betrayed the strain of the night, yet he no longer sought to flee from the rangers. They had kept their distance, moving with slow, careful steps, giving him space to assert control over the fragile moment. His trunk lifted slightly, swaying as if measuring the air, and his ears twitched at the faintest disturbance in the wind. The rangers could see the subtle tension in his small frame, the way he pressed one foot carefully into the ground before shifting his weight forward. In that delicate balance, there was courage not reckless, but deliberate. As they edged closer, the calf took a tentative step toward them. His trunk brushed the dust lightly, sensing, testing, and then retreated, only to extend again with the same careful rhythm. The rangers held their position, voices low, breathing steady, letting the young elephant guide the pace. "It's okay," one murmured softly, voice barely above a whisper, carrying no urgency, only assurance. The calf's dark eyes met theirs briefly, wide, alert, and full of quiet desperation. He did not flee. Instead, he advanced, small but determined steps, toward the humans who had so far been observers. There was an implicit trust in the gesture, a fragile bridge built between species, born of necessity and recognition. The heat rose off the dry riverbed, blending with the faint scent of dust, grass, and distant vegetation. The calf's skin glimmered with sweat and fine soil, each movement scattering tiny clouds of dust around his hooves. His ears flared and flicked in subtle motions, catching every nuance in the shifting air. The rangers noted how he moved with deliberate care, trunk brushing lightly against stones and soil, feeling for stability, seeking orientation in the landscape that had grown unfamiliar overnight. There was no hesitation in the bravery itself, only caution tempered by need. The air carried a faint hint of danger, subtle and almost imperceptible, yet enough to make the calf stiffen each time he paused. He sniffed the wind, trunk lifted and curled, scanning for scents that might explain the lingering threat. The rangers observed the way his eyes darted toward the dry reeds lining the riverbed, ears pivoting, tail flicking in measured response. Though small and seemingly vulnerable, the calf projected a presence that commanded attention. Every movement was careful, deliberate, yet brave. It became clear that his proximity to the humans was not born of recklessness, but of a practical understanding. Their presence offered observation, protection, and potential assistance against a danger he could not yet confront alone. One ranger crouched slightly lower, maintaining a respectful distance. "You're safe here," he whispered, words absorbed into the dry morning air. The calf's trunk quivered at the sound, then shifted back to the soil, brushing over the edge of a print that circled him like a silent warning. His small body pressed slightly forward, legs bending with quiet determination, testing the ground for stability, as if preparing to move toward something unseen. He took another step, eyes alert, nostrils flaring. It was an act of measured courage, small, deliberate, purposeful, signaling a readiness to face the unknown. The circle of footprints seemed almost to react to his bravery. The rangers noticed faint disturbances along the periphery, subtle indentations suggesting a predator had paused here recently. A low rumble vibrated in the calf's throat, neither alarm nor call, but recognition. Private communication with the earth beneath him. He moved carefully toward a faint depression where the prints were more numerous. Trunk extended, nostrils quivering with awareness. The pattern suggested the presence of a larger animal still lingering nearby, unseen yet influential. The calf did not retreat. He leaned in, small body trembling, but forward. Bridging the gap between vulnerability and necessity, the rangers followed slowly, their eyes scanning the surroundings, Noting every movement, every flinch, every subtle shift in dust or reed, the calf paused, trunk extended, nostrils flaring, ears alert. He sniffed the air and lowered his head, pressing gently against a small mound of soil. There was a faint tremor in the ground, and instinctively he moved closer to it. Trunk brushing delicately over disturbed dirt and scattered pebbles. The humans could see that this was no casual wandering. The calf's actions were deliberate, a small sentinel surveying for danger. Standing in place for the one he had been searching for, guarding against a threat that still lingered in silence. Minutes passed as the calf circled a small patch of disturbed earth, trunk tracing each subtle depression, ears flicking at distant sounds, tail flicking intermittently. His body trembled with effort, yet there was no hesitation in his intent. The rangers noted the pattern. He was leading them, unconsciously revealing the locus of his concern. The prince had guided him here, but his courage carried him beyond them, toward the source of anxiety that had unsettled his night. Each step he took was a quiet declaration of resolve, small yet profoundly moving. A gentle breeze stirred the parched reeds, carrying scents of distant water and dry foliage. The calf paused mid-step, head lifted, ears spread wide, sensing the faintest shift in the air. His small eyes darted toward the shadows where the larger footprints had led. A soft, almost imperceptible rumble escaped him. One ranger, crouched in silent observation, whispered, "It's all right, we're here." Barely audible, words floating toward him without urgency. The calf responded with a slow, deliberate step, moving closer, trusting them as allies. His tiny frame, embodying a resilience far greater than his size suggested, it became clear to the rangers that the calf's bravery was not mere instinct. It was a necessity. He had identified a lingering danger, something beyond his experience, yet demanding confrontation. His approach revealed the perimeter of threat, guiding the humans to the unseen presence that had cast shadows over the dry riverbed. He stood small but defiant, each tremor in his legs a testament to endurance, each careful movement toward the humans a measure of trust and courage. By the time the rangers could fully assess the scene, the calf had established his position, forward-leaning, alert and intentional. He was no longer simply a frightened young elephant, but a guide, now bridging the gap between fear and understanding, revealing the presence of a danger that had remained hidden until now. In that quiet morning under the rising sun, the calf had chosen to confront uncertainty with measured bravery, trusting the humans enough to share his knowledge and to protect what mattered most to him. The tall grass shivered in the early morning breeze as the rangers carefully followed the path the calf had traced. Each subtle movement of the small elephant's body seemed to pull them closer, guiding their eyes toward a hidden part of the riverbed. The air was thick with the scent of dry earth and vegetation, mixed with something more urgent, faint yet unmistakable. The calf's small steps were deliberate, trunk extended, nostrils flaring as he led the way. The rangers remained cautious, boots soft against the ground, voices hushed, aware that the source of unease lay just beyond the veil of swaying grass. As they edged closer, a shadowy shape emerged through the green and gold stalks. At first, it was indistinct, a mass lying low against the earth, almost indistinguishable from the surrounding vegetation. Then the rangers saw it clearly, the large form of an adult elephant. Partially obscured, her breathing shallow but steady. The rise and fall of her massive body faintly visible through the movement of the grass. She was wounded, a leg twisted beneath her, shoulders scraped raw against the rocky soil. The rangers froze for a moment, taking in the scene, the mother, vulnerable yet alive, and the calf standing close by, small body tense, eyes fixed on her with unwavering attention. The calf remained rooted, trunk lightly brushing the mother's flank as if to reassure her, ears flicking constantly toward the rustling edges of the grass. His presence was steadfast, a quiet sentinel guarding against any remaining threats. He did not move to retreat even when the rangers approached carefully, hands raised in non-threatening gestures. Instead, he maintained a gentle proximity, allowing the humans to assess the situation without fear. Every subtle shiver of his small body spoke of vigilance. Of the long hours spent keeping watch through the night, while his mother had been unable to rise, the rangers knelt slowly, assessing the mother's condition. Her breathing was shallow, but rhythmic, each inhale a laborious effort as if the effort of standing had exhausted her. Her eyes, half closed and unblinking, followed the calf's movements with soft acknowledgement. A shallow wound along her shoulder suggested a struggle, perhaps against the same danger that had circled the young calf in the night. The rangers exchanged quiet glances. Understanding the delicate balance they now faced, they needed to help without startling either animal, to stabilize without causing panic. One ranger stepped slightly closer, moving with deliberate care. "We'll get you steady," he whispered, voice soft and steady. The calf flinched at the sound but did not retreat, keeping trunk and body oriented toward his mother. He swayed slightly, pressing one small leg against her side as if to bolster her strength, a silent gesture of protection. The rangers noted the gentle pressure, the almost imperceptible rhythm of trust between mother and calf. Every movement was careful, respectful. Each human step an acknowledgement of the animal's space and autonomy. The tall grass bent beneath the breeze, brushing against the mother's side and the calf's small legs. The texture of the soil was rough and uneven, littered with stones and dry clumps of vegetation that scraped against their feet and skin. The rangers worked slowly, gently repositioning the mother's legs to relieve the pressure on her twisted limb. She flinched once, low rumble escaping her throat, but did not resist beyond what was necessary. The calf's trunk nudged gently against her, and she responded with a soft, trembling rumble of acknowledgement. The connection between them was palpable, a quiet exchange of trust and reassurance that had been forged in the darkness of fear. The calf's small body remained tense, ears flicking, trunk swaying, as he observed the human's careful actions. He took short steps forward, pressing lightly against his mother's side when she shifted unsteadily, guiding her without force. The rangers worked to clean the abrasions on her shoulder and leg, using minimal movement and gentle touch, aware that sudden action could trigger panic. Each motion was slow, deliberate, a dance of patience and observation. The calf's vigilance never wavered. His small trunk occasionally brushed against the human's hands in quiet investigation, as if granting permission for their presence. Time passed in quiet concentration. Measured by the mother's shallow breathing and the occasional rumble from the calf, the rangers adjusted blankets of fabric and water-soaked cloths to soothe the abrasions, lifted her body gently when necessary, and monitored her vitals with soft murmurs of reassurance. The calf stepped in rhythm with them, trunk tracing the air near her wounds without touching aggressively, a protective presence that radiated intent and care. His small frame shivered with exhaustion, yet he remained steadfast, alert to every movement and sound. At last, after careful assessment and intervention, the mother shifted slightly. Pressing her weight against the small calf's side, she lifted her head slowly, trunk curling in a tentative stretch, then returned it to the soil. The calf nuzzled gently against her, ears flaring, trunk brushing softly along her flank. The rangers observed quietly, noting how his bravery had carried him through the night, how his vigilance had guided them to this moment. The danger that had threatened them both was now accounted for. The mother stabilized enough to rise when the time came, and the bond between them remained strong and unbroken. The sun climbed higher, dust motes shimmering in the golden light, casting a gentle haze over the scene. The calf and his mother rested briefly, bodies close, ears flicking, eyes alert but softening in trust. The rangers allowed a respectful distance, understanding that the animal's reunion and recovery were the priorities. The calf's small trunk grazed her side once more, tentative and careful, quiet acknowledgement that he had faced the night alone and kept watch while she was vulnerable. In that shared moment of relief, the rangers felt the weight of what had occurred, the silent courage of a young elephant, the quiet endurance of a mother, and the delicate balance that had allowed them both to survive. Finally, as the morning breeze stirred the tall grass and the sunlight softened over the riverbed, the calf leaned close to his mother, trunk curled against her leg. She breathed steadily, still weak but alive, and he remained vigilant, small body trembling in exhaustion yet resolute. The rangers stepped back slowly, observing the quiet triumph of survival. Aware that the events of the night would remain with them, a testament to courage, trust, and the invisible threads that connect life in the wild. The first rays of dawn stretched across the plains. Soft and golden, illuminating the riverbed in a quiet wash of light, the tall grass swayed gently in the morning breeze. Brushing against the mother elephant's side and the small frame of her calf, the air was calm, carrying faint scents of earth, dry vegetation and distant water, a subtle reminder of life persisting beyond the shadows of the night. The calf's body trembled slightly from exhaustion, but he remained close to his mother, Trunk lightly brushing her leg in tentative reassurance. The rangers held their distance, watching in silence, aware that the most profound moments often required patience and respect. Slowly, deliberately, the mother shifted her weight, pressing against the soft earth before attempting to rise. Her legs trembled as they unfurled beneath her, the strain of injury and long hours evident in each careful motion. The calf nudged gently, Trunk brushing her side as if encouraging her, a small gesture of comfort and persistence. She lifted her head, ears flicking, eyes half closed but attentive, scanning the landscape before focusing on the small figure that had remained at her side throughout the night. The calf responded with a subtle step closer. Trunk curled in a protective arc around her foreleg, steadying her without force. A low, trembling rumble vibrated from the mother's throat, soft and quivering. It was not a call of alarm, but a greeting, a recognition, and a release of the tension that had gripped the night. The calf responded immediately, ears flaring slightly, Trunk rising to touch her shoulder in a gesture that was both inquiry and reassurance. The rangers noted the rhythm of their exchange. Subtle and profound, a dialogue of presence rather than words, a communication shaped by trust, care, and shared endurance. Each rumble and gentle movement conveyed volumes about the bond between them, a connection forged in the vulnerability and uncertainty of the past hours. The calf stepped lightly forward, pressing his small body close to the mother, Trunk brushing her side, testing her stability. The mother leaned slightly into him, acknowledging his presence, Trunk reaching down briefly to nudge him in return. There was no urgency, no dramatic gesture, only a quiet and overwhelming reunion marked by shared breathing, synchronized movements, and the soft resonance of mutual relief. The rangers observed with careful admiration, aware that they were witnessing a form of courage that went beyond physical size, a courage that had carried both calf and mother through a night of uncertainty and potential peril. The morning light spilled across the riverbed, highlighting the subtle textures of the terrain, the cracked earth beneath their feet, the scattered pebbles, and the pale shadows of the tall grasses that swayed in the gentle wind. Dust clung faintly to the calf's dark skin, and the mother's body bore the marks of her struggle, but together they created a portrait of resilience. The calf's small legs quivered with effort as he pressed gently against his mother's side, a silent offer of support. She shifted again, legs bending cautiously beneath her, Trunk rising to brush a small patch of grass, testing the ground for balance. Each movement was deliberate, measured, and rooted in an instinctual understanding of vulnerability and protection. The rangers remained still, observing as the mother found a stable stance and lifted herself fully, legs trembling but functional. The calf moved alongside her, trunk intertwined lightly with her foreleg, nudging her gently as she adjusted her footing. He stepped cautiously, small yet determined, matching her slow rhythm. Their reunion was understated, the weight of survival felt rather than spoken. The quiet intensity of the moment hung in the air. The rangers felt the gravity of it, the realization that they had borne witness to a bravery far beyond what most would recognize in a small, young elephant. A soft breeze passed through the riverbed, rustling the tall grasses and carrying the faint scent of water and distant earth. The calf pressed his trunk against his mother's side once more, tail flicking lightly as she responded with a low rumble of acknowledgement. The morning sun continued to rise, illuminating the curve of her back, the texture of her skin, and the delicate, weary movements of her calf. It was a quiet, unassuming victory, a reclamation of presence, stability, and connection. The rangers exchanged silent glances, understanding that the night's trials had ended not with spectacle, but with the enduring and intimate act of reunion. The mother shifted slightly, trunk curling to nudge her calf, and he responded in kind, pressing gently with the tip of his trunk against her shoulder. The connection was delicate, intimate, and powerful, an expression of care and recognition born from shared challenge. The rangers took careful steps back, giving them space, and the mother and calf adjusted naturally, moving together as a unit, their bodies attuned to each other's rhythms. The calf's small body quivered one last time before settling into a steadier stance, ears flicking gently, eyes brightening in recognition of safety and the presence of life around him. The sun climbed higher, casting a warm glow over the plains, dust rising softly around their feet as they shifted. The mother lowered her trunk briefly to the ground, testing its stability, while the calf mirrored her movements, careful and deliberate. There was no rush, no sudden motion, only the slow and steady reclaiming of confidence and strength. Each subtle gesture, from the mother's tentative sway to the calf's quiet nudges, spoke of endurance, love, and courage. The rangers remained at the periphery, witnessing without interference, hearts full with the weight of what they had observed. Finally, the mother and calf began to move together toward the edge of the riverbed, legs steadying, trunks occasionally brushing the soil as if to anchor themselves in the present. The grass swayed around them, the wind stirring dust and faint scents of distant vegetation. Their small shadows stretched across the earth, moving in unison. The calf's tiny figure, a testament to resilience and bravery. The rangers took a last step back, eyes lingering on the quiet reunion, knowing they had been part of something profound yet intimate. The land remained calm, the air soft, and the distant sound of other wildlife returned to the riverbed, a gentle acknowledgement of life resuming its rhythm. As the sun rose fully, painting the sky in pale gold and amber, the mother and calf continued walking side by side towards safety and the distant movement of their herd. Their reunion was complete, quiet but overwhelming in its gravity. The rangers watched in silence, carrying with them the memory of a small calf who had faced the night alone, guided by courage, vigilance, and love, and the mother who had endured to rise and reclaim her place in the world. In that moment, the plains held only the soft sway of grass, the warm light, and the steady footsteps of life moving forward.